Ladies and gentlemen, this is your host, Manny Moonraker, and I would like to invite you this evening, and for those of you who are going to be listening on Spotify, iHeart, and everywhere else, this is the Dark Horde Author Spotlight UFO Buster Radio edition, and tonight I have an author for you that has put some work in. Not only is he an author, he researches, he has some experience, he knows people that had experiences, and he is basically an author of 22 books on this topic. 22 books in total. Now, not all of them are UFO related, but let me tell you, this is not someone who printed a book like 10 years ago and is still on the circuit trying to promote paranormal books related to ufology. But I just got to tell you this. He recently won the Writers and Illustrators of the Future contest that's being published in the best-selling anthology, the L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future, Volume 35. And I want you to really welcome this individual who I'm sure has done so much research into the topic of ufology. You're going to find him refreshing. You're going to find him interesting. And I think that you're going to find the link that I have into the Amazon account for all his publications. You're going to find those interesting as well. I want to welcome to the show Preston Dennett. Preston, welcome to the show today.
Hey, thanks, Manny. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.
Listen, I'm going to be honest. I had so many things going on the last few weeks, and you know, speaking to your rep, that it's been like almost hit or miss. But I am so glad that you're here today because you have what people really should look at as far as an individual that publishes books based on research, not just innuendos or things that people say through, you know, different websites and things like that. You actually did this research to write these books, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I did my field work, literally, tromping out in those fields late at night looking for this stuff, knocking door to door, putting up flyers. I contacted the police, became a MUFON field investigator, joined all the UFO groups, subscribed to all the magazines. I mean, I dived deep into the deep end. And
that's the way it's got to be. That's the way it got to be, isn't it, Preston?
Yeah, I mean, if you want answers, and I did, because it was happening to my own family. And that freaked me out. I mean, this wasn't taught in schools. I wasn't really taken seriously back then in 1988. Not as much as it is today, at least. So yeah, I mean, I was shattered by learning that UFOs were real. It was not good news.
So this is funny because one of the things that I ask folks when they come on, especially when they're writing books, you know, what is it that drove you? What gave you the insight or the need to further research and actually put pen and paper? Because writing a book is not an easy thing. Doing research is not simple. So you really have to have that passion behind it. And you just alluded to something that gave you that passion, right? So what was it back in the 80s that said to you, Preston, maybe you need to write about this?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of always wanted to be a writer, a science fiction writer. I couldn't really do it. I gave up. Now I got back into it a little bit, won that contest, which is really cool. But this is not science fiction. As far as UFOs, I thought they were.
Right.
I did not believe in it, not for a second, and was very skeptical. My brother, years ago, 1970s, comes running in, says, I saw a UFO. And we all just said, yeah, right, and didn't even listen to him. And it was, I remember the night exactly. It was like November 17th or 15th, around there. This report comes on the news about a pilot over Alaska who saw a UFO. I didn't believe it, but I thought this pilot is nuts. He's a commercial airline pilot. Mm-hmm. What is he doing putting his reputation on the line, right? So I started asking people. I found out my brother, of course, had seen a UFO. He chased it with his two friends. I spoke to both of his friends. My sister-in-law had a sighting with her two friends. I spoke to them. She had a face-to-face encounter with a gray alien.
Oh, boy.
My other sister-in-law had an entity encounter. I brought it up at work. The lady's like, oh, yeah, it followed us home, me and my friend and my mom. And it's weird. It takes us 5 minutes to get home, but it took us like an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, geez.
I'm like, holy cow. She doesn't know about UFOs. She hasn't read any books on this. She doesn't know about missing time. So, yeah, this hit home for me, and I was devastated. I really could not let this go. I didn't have any experiences in my own past that I could find, But it wasn't long before I started having some, let me tell you.
Yeah, then that's fascinating because they say that usually when you have family members that have experiences, chances are you might have been involved in that and you don't even know it.
Yeah, it's certainly what I found out from talking to people. It's one of the, when someone's had an onboard UFO experience, a question at some point I ask them is, all right, have your parents ever brought this subject up? Do they talk about it? And at least half the time, they're like, oh, yeah, my mom was chased home and she doesn't remember what happened, or, something like that. Or entities would come and like, yeah, they do. This does follow family generations. That's certainly a pattern, but it's not, strict. Because I've got lots of cases, a third maybe, where people have never had an experience before or since. They don't know anybody who has. It's not in their family. So just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want people to understand that this isn't, you're just not writing one book and forget it. Hey, go in there, write a book and I'm done. You've actually written 22 books and you've also had more than 100 articles about the UFO paranormal situation. So you're not like some Johnny come lately. You have a lot of knowledge that you're sharing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One of my first books was about people who've been healed as a result of UFO encounters. I collected 100 cases, some of my own, and that was followed up by UFOs over Topanga Canyon, which chronicled a wave of sightings from 1992 to 1994. A bunch of people called the police. A bunch of people were calling the newspapers. I grew up in that area, so I was able to, get a lot of contacts. So, yeah, I've been doing my field work. This is what I do on nights and weekends, basically. I work full time as a bookkeeper.
I like the dedication to the topic. Now, it's funny that you talked about healing because not too long ago, about 2 years ago, I saw Travis Walton at a UFO conference. And, of course, everybody knows Fire in the Sky, right? Have you ever seen the movie?
Oh, of course, yeah.
So Travis Walton, in this particular conference, they asked him a question. He said, Travis, what do you think happened when you were missing for those 6 days? And he said, I think what happened was when they hit me with the beam, they pretty much killed me. And so what they were trying to do was put me back together in those 6 days. Do you find that, especially in the research you've done, that maybe some of the healing happens because they kind of screwed up and kind of hurt us in a way that it was unintentional, kind of like what Travis Walton was saying?
Yeah, I mean, that does turn up. I've now, my latest book is The Healing Power of UFOs. It's got 300 cases, and there's about 10 or 20 cases like that where people are injured while they're getting abducted.
Wow.
That happened to Sergeant Charles Moody in Alamogordo, New Mexico. He gets, this UFO drops down on the road in front of him. ETs come out, and they're pulling him out of his car, and he's fighting them all the way and injures his back, and they take him on board the UFO and they heal the injury, which basically they caused. There's a couple of cases, another case like that in Japan. A guy's running from the UFO and trips and falls and gashes his hand pretty bad and his arm, and they pull him on board and heal it with like this laser-like light.
That is just amazing. And it's weird because you think a lot of times the spin on abductions, it's really negative, really ominous. You don't hear, like Travis Walton was saying, that maybe they're trying to fix what they've done, or it's almost like we're like a medical experiment kind of. What do you see the overall theme is in these healing situations?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you look at people who've been taken on board, the single thing they describe most is being physically examined. So right. We know right off the bat that ETs know more about the human body than we do. And these healing accounts have been kind of pushed to the side because they are incredible and a little bit hard to believe, though they actually represent great evidence. We've got before and after x-rays and stuff. And I have to tell you, pretty much every major researcher out there has gotten these types of cases. Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith, Tim Beckley, Brad Steiger, all of them have these types of cases. They're just not getting a lot of attention.
I wonder why that is. I guess that's something we should tackle in a little bit. But I always feel like there's a reason why this kind of information is always kept in the dark or it just doesn't get any traction, which is kind of strange.
Yeah, it bothers me for sure because here's what's really amazing. There are some whistleblowers coming out right now who were involved in UFO crash retrievals, which I totally believe is a real phenomena. I wrote UFOs over California, and that was followed by a bunch of other states, New Mexico, New York, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, where I chronicled basically the history of each state. And each of these states have UFO crashes in them. It's not just Roswell or Aztec or Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, the most famous UFO crashes. Mm-hmm. There are hundreds of these things. And my point is, our military, or some aspect of it, has gotten a hold of these craft and is pulling technology out of it, which is mostly, or to a large part, healing technology or medical technology. And these whistleblowers are saying that, yeah, we have all kinds of stuff that can open and close a human body, just open a wound and then close it right up, can cure tumors, make tumors disappear, and show the inside of the body in full color, and a bunch of stuff that's it's being covered up and being used on a very limited basis. And I feel like, we should be able to use this stuff.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because I have a thing with Stephen Greer, and I'm sure you know who Stephen Greer is.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like in a lot of ways he's like 50-50 for me. He's hit or miss. But when I hear you speak, he kind of comes to mind because he says it's embarrassing the amount of evidence that we have about this ufology situation and all the things that are happening, that it's his quote is an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I thought when I got involved back in 1988. I'm like, this has been investigated for decades. The proof is already in the public arena. What is going on? And what I found is that it's not quite that simple. This is a topic that is being actively covered up by the U.S. government, viciously, relentlessly, ruthlessly, to the point where they not only threaten people, they will rub you out. We have enough evidence of that to say that is most likely the case. And beyond that, there's a faction of people who are just greedy hoaxers. They just want to make money off of this. They want to fool people. Then there's another aspect where we have government agents who are actively introducing disinformation into this subject. And beyond this, there's all these people who are actually having experiences. So it also draws in a sort of a fringe element of society as well. And it makes for a very complicated and kind of sticky mess.
It sure does. No kidding. It kind of makes you a little bit crazy in the head. Like I told you before, and for you guys that don't know, I was speaking to Preston before we got started, and I said, sometimes, I just let the expletives fly, especially on the podcast, because I can't take this shit. I really can't.
Yeah, I'm ready to go on a tirade, let me tell you, because this is a subject I take very seriously. It's basically amounts to a constitutional crisis. This cover-up is not legal, and people are being threatened and killed. And this technology that we have, this sort of free energy, basically could solve the energy crisis, the economic crisis, and the environmental crisis, which is what's paralyzing us right now, and are largely manufactured. We don't need to go through this. We have ways to solve it. And it's very easy if we just release this technology, which I think will happen. We really have no choice.
Yeah, eventually the pressure is there to get this moving. So, Preston, so one of the things that we talked about earlier was one of your books, Undersea UFO Base, an in-depth investigation into USOs in the Santa Catalina Channel, and we talked about it kind of reminds me a little bit of a whole Tic Tac situation. And what I find a lot is that whenever we have a new report, a new incident, whatever it is, East Coast near collisions with jet fighters, or it could be the stuff that happened off the West Coast with the Nimitz and stuff like that, that there's always some kind of a report or some aspect of it that you can link to something that happened in the past that was reported, was documented, but we decided to poo-poo it away and no one really went after it. Do you find that, especially in putting the USO's book together, that there's a lot of situations which ring true in the past that seem to be repeating itself?
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what I found. I do think that there might be a UFO base down in this channel, which is very deep, up to a mile deep at parts. And one of the first reasons I thought that was because of what you're saying. There's this huge, it's actually a pretty small area, but this area between Catalina and the mainland has had a huge number of reports stretching back over 100 years in this sharply defined area. So clearly there's something going on, because this is one of the top producers of, USOs, unidentified submersible objects, in the world. These objects are coming in and out of the water, sometimes in really large numbers. And that was sort of my second, what is going on here?
Right.
Because, someone sees a UFO, maybe 2, maybe 5, right? That's not that uncommon. But to see 10, 20, or let's say 40, how about 50? I've got 3-4 cases involving hundreds of objects. So what is going on here? That's really unusual. There's only, a handful of cases like that really in the whole UFO literature. There's a few, but not in one area like this. So there's something going on for sure in this area.
Yeah, and I remember, and I can't remember, it was a long time ago since I read this report about a fisherman that was out there on a fishing vessel that actually saw a UFO rise out of the water. Was that also out there in the West Coast?
Possibly. I got a lot of cases just like that. It's crazy because these objects will actually target boats. One guy, he's a senior electronics physicist or something like that. Pretty smart guy. He's got a fully operational boat. He's up there at the north, sort of like this, the north end of Catalina, and sees this green glow ahead of him. It's at night. It's a foggy night. And he stops his boat because, that's what you do if you see something you can't identify. And this thing comes right under his boat, about 100 feet. He can read it on his depth sounder before it totally goes haywire. All his electronics fail. His compasses are spinning. His radio fails. He says it scared the daylights out of him before it finally moved off. And there's a bunch of cases like that. Another guy closer to Catalina is heading around the island when suddenly he says the ocean lit up under him in a perfectly square shape. He says it was like a swimming pool, an indoor swimming pool is what it reminded him of. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, pretty much you're screwed because you've got nowhere to go. You're sitting in a boat.
Yeah. There are a number of missing craft in this area. Occasionally planes disappear and they don't find them, and I always wonder about that. Because there is one case that is verified where a gentleman, Noah Felice, saw a USO. It was on the water and it wasn't a boat. And he saw strange figures, and he's flying around, and he had just taken off from Catalina Island, and he decides to do a loop, and come back, a U-turn, and see what this was he saw. Gets lower and lower, and this thing sends out a beam of light which hits his plane, causing it to crash. So it's a crazy case.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And it's funny how you still are, really, if you just look at your body of work right now, all these books based on UFO situations, sightings, conversations, and research, how could any one government on the planet not think that there's an issue?
Oh, they all know. Absolutely. Certainly the major countries know, and I believe on some level are cooperating with each other. It's hard to say, but the evidence of a cover-up is undeniable. It's demonstrable. We have enough documents that are completely blacked out that we know. The Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, an old sort of UFO group, sued the government, sued the NSA for some documents, and every single one came back completely blacked out.
Right.
And the judge who saw it, he was allowed to view it, and he agreed with them being blacked out. He says, "There's no way we can release this." So.
Yeah, those FOIA requests, oh boy, do they really help? I just don't know. I don't know. But here's my thing. Do you ever find yourself, when you're writing these books, USOs, healing, UFOs over Arizona, over Colorado, do you ever find yourself thinking, this is so elementary. It is so elementary. How could no one really care? My biggest issue is, I know, we become a technology society. We're always looking on our phones. But this is over our skies. I mean, we should be scared. We find out that there's a sexual predator a few blocks away. Why wouldn't we be scared if there's people being abducted at will a few blocks away. Doesn't that seem strange to you?
Yeah, it does. And I think, I kind of have a little bit of a handle on it because I remember hearing about UFOs when I was a skeptic, watching, this old show In Search Of. They talked about it, and every now and then.
With Leonard Nimoy.
Right.
Doing the
And
voiceovers.
And I'd be like, yeah, right, pshaw, I didn't believe this stuff. People are crazy. So the UFO subject is like, sex or religion or politics, sort of a core belief in people's worldview. And if you're not ready to, open that up or, shift a little bit, you defend it at all costs. People are very entrenched in those sort of core beliefs. And I think that's one of the reasons we see this. Another is, the active cover-up to make this subject look crazy, which was very effective and is still a real problem today. This is what, we have to blame who's responsible. It's our military who did that, would make witnesses look like fools, knowing full well it was a real phenomenon and they had a true encounter. So that's another reason. I think what we're seeing now is a real shift. Most people do believe in this subject, and once you get kind of drawn into it, it keeps you in there, and you know that this is real. And we're seeing more and more a steady sort of step-by-step acceptance that the UFO phenomena is real and does deserve attention. And I think we're going to continue to see that.
So do you think that maybe this is a controlled, let's say, quote-unquote, disclosure?
Very. I think you hit right on it. There was that, a couple of years ago, there was the Pentagon came out and said, oh, yeah, there's the beginning of this footage coming out from the pilots. And it was a big deal because we haven't had any movement. It's been a complete traffic jam, and the pressure's just been building and building. And I feel like I'll call it the secret government, because God knows there are senators and representatives and probably presidents who don't know the full story, for sure. This is more held at very high military levels, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army, a sort of a quasi-military industrial complex sort of thing. That's who's in control of this. And they're dribbling it out bit by bit, and they're showing us this, here's some footage, and here's a pilot's testimony, when right behind the curtain there is the crashed UFO and the alien bodies. I mean, we've got them. There's no doubt. It's not just at Wright-Patterson or Area 51 or Edwards Air Force Base. Our military bases are neck deep in this stuff across the United States and, for that matter, the world.
Yeah, it's just a crazy situation. It really is. And it kind of makes you wonder, how do people get away with this? Now, you have another book called The UFOs Over Arizona, and the rest of the title is A True History of Extraterrestrial Encounters in the Grand Canyon State. There is one UFO encounter which everyone knows who's into ufology, and that's the Phoenix Lights. What's your take on the Phoenix Lights?
Yeah, it's a record-breaking event. I think it's probably the United States' biggest encounter in terms of being widely viewed and well-known and verified. It's an absolutely true event. No, I don't think it's ours. There's been some speculation about that. And the reason I say that is because this thing was tracked through callers in to like the National UFO Reporting Center and other places. They were able to track this thing as it came south across the U.S., crossed over Luke Air Force Base, which is near Phoenix, right next to it. And they went on lockdown. I mean, it completely put that base in an uproar. They launched planes. They later denied it. They released a bunch of contradictory statements. They were asked, did anyone call you? And they said, no one called us. Well, people were calling them nonstop, and they later had to admit, oh, yeah, we did receive some calls. So there was all kinds of misleading and contradictory statements that they released. They did scramble planes, which they continue to deny to this day. But the people who live next to the base saw this happen. And there's hundreds of witnesses. I think it was a staged event on the part of I'm going to call them ETs. I think that's the best explanation we got for this. I think that they put on a demonstration, a publicity stunt, and said, we're here, get used to it.
So do you think they want to be known? Do you think that they're trying to circumvent the powers that be and kind of show people that they really do exist.
Yeah, absolutely. This is supposedly what happened back in 1954. President Eisenhower allegedly met face-to-face with ETs. And I know how that sounds, but this story, the rumors began immediately after it happened, and there's been more and more evidence confirming this. And for that matter, other leaders having direct contact, and ETs working with humans at places like Rendlesham, Edwards Air Force Base, Area 51, and so on. So back then, the ETs wanted to disclose, and I think that's sort of one of their agendas. Certainly, it's what they have told people who are having experiences, who are taken on board. So I think that they're pushing it, and this is one of the reasons why the government is doing it. And another reason the government is being forced to disclose is not only from pressure from society and from the ETs, but they are so neck deep in secrets right now. We have this secret space race going on that they have to release this stuff to distract from that.
Yeah, the secret space race. I mean, that's another one. And actually, something that was covered by MUFON in a recent symposium. Now, I know that you have some experience with MUFON, but what do you think about that last symposium where they were talking about the secret space? What was it? Secret space programs. And I think they even had Corey Good there.
I didn't get to attend. I do have the symposium notes, and I've just about finished reading them. And yeah, I mean, some of it's pretty persuasive. Others, not so much. But there's got Mark McCandlish, I think is his name. His testimony was pretty powerful. And some of these guys, I'm like, wow, I mean, yeah. We don't have the full story. It's being covered up. And these stories we're hearing are like just little leaks that are coming through of what appears to be a vast conspiracy, a vast sort of extraterrestrial activity done by humans beyond Earth without public knowledge.
So listen, I know I've heard you do some recent interviews, and I think that we kind of see this the same way. So the way I feel about this is, and you're in a situation where you have this bounty of evidence that can't be proven, because you have people who say they have experiences. You have people who, videotape things, albeit they're terrible videos. You have situations recently with the U.S. Navy, but yet there is no concrete evidence. There's no material. There isn't anything that's going to be the aha moment for the world to realize that these decades of experiences and reports are not just bullshit. This is real thing. People are really experiencing these things. And I know that in many ways you feel that way as well. I pretty much think that the universe is way too big for it just to be us. And I think that there are visitors here. It may not be the frequency that we might be seeing or people might be reporting, but I do think that they are. What do you think is maybe the nature of these visits, and how often do you think they really happen?
Oh, a lot more than I think even people within the UFO community realize. It is a real phenomenon. There's lots of compelling evidence out there. I think there is smoking gun evidence with the implant removals and, the medical evidence. So I think we're definitely moving forward on that front.
But doesn't it strike you strange that no one really looks into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a definite problem for sure. But I think we do have a handle on what the ET agenda is. And I mean, here, look at it this way. In terms of how common is the UFO experience, I heard that way back in the day when I started investigating that 1 in 40 people have had an onboard experience. That's a quote from J. Allen Hynek, who worked at Project Blue Book in the Air Force.
Right, Didn't believe it. The father of ufology, actually.
Right. Didn't believe it for a second, but looked into it. That's what really got me interviewing everyone I knew. And I found more than 5 people in, a sample of 50 within my own circle of family, friends, and coworkers. And I surveyed all the researchers, and yeah, it looked like this was a very common experience. And I put out an article for the MUFON Journal called 1 in 40, which basically put the evidence forth. And it was about a year later that the Roper poll came out, which sort of tested the likelihood of a UFO abduction. And They said 1 in 50. But now here's the thing. If you look at NUFORC and MUFON, the two major UFO reporting centers, they get multiple reports daily, a dozen more. And I know from personal experience, 'cause I always ask people, did you call MUFON? Did you call NUFORC? Did you call the police? 1 in 10 people, and that's being really generous, reports their experience officially. It's probably closer to 1 in 100, honestly. But let's just say it's 1 in 10. So that means that there are 100, 200, 300 sightings per day in the United States alone. That means it's always going on somewhere at some point. The UFO phenomena is a constant circulating phenomena that doesn't stop. It's always taking place. So I think, it's very common. But as far as their agenda, I think we got a real good handle on it, because when people are taken on board, I've come to pretty much be able to predict to a certain extent what a person is going to say to me. And what I hear is, beyond being physically examined, and they say, oh, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you, which is usually all you get. But some people do have conversations, and it generally falls into 3 sort of categories. The first being, and this is most common, and I hear it all the time, warnings of some kind. Warnings against nuclear proliferation, against pollution, against overpopulation, against our warlike ways. Like one guy, this Navy guy, I talked to, a medic, had an experience where he was taken on board a UFO and saw praying mantis-type ETs. And they said, since you started using nuclear power and exploding these bombs on your planet, you started a countdown clock. And they showed him, like in full holographic color, all these disasters that would happen. Hurricanes mostly, but earthquakes, tornadoes, all kinds of stuff. So that's very common. I think they're very concerned about our planet.
And it's weird for me because a lot of times when I look at these reports, and I might just be looking at people that have that ominous, threat of alien life coming after them, kind of like the Sigourney Weaver alien, come through their belly and stuff like that, And those are the things that I see. I seldom come across the people that are like, hey, they just want to help us. They're trying to tell us that we're going to screw the planet up, we're going to blow things up or whatever. But what I find a lot is that a lot of people, it's easier for them to continue with their everyday life and kind of ignore these things because, life is hectic, right? You got to work, you got a family, you got to, rear kids, all this kind of stuff. But what I'm noticing a trend lately is that the rich are really involved now in trying to ascertain a lot of data when it comes to UFO and aliens. Is that kind of strange that there's this big grab for ET data and technology? Yeah,
because they know. And for people who thinks this doesn't affect them and, I've never seen one, blah, 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 it does affect you. I mean, the fact that we all have to work for a living, the fact that there's a unequal wealth distribution, it's no accident that gas prices are so high. And I could go on, the drug companies, the banking companies, the insurance companies are stiffing us, and they're the ones who are in control of this technology. It does affect you. It's created an untenable situation on our planet, which is being choked with greed and corruption and can't go on. And I think that's one of the reasons why the ETs are pushing this disclosure agenda, because we got to get this technology out. We have to wake people up to the fact that we're not alone in the universe. And I think we are going to be seeing some big changes, really shocking changes, if the government doesn't disclose. If they don't, they're going to lose control of this subject, and they don't want that.
So, one of my favorite folks in this, current ufology situation or environment, if you want to call it that, is Robert Bigelow, which I adorably call him, Deuce Bigelow, the space gigolo. So Robert Bigelow has really, he had an experience back when he was a kid with the grandparents. He saw a UFO, whatever. But he has done so many things outside of his hotel business in order to grab UFO information, getting information from the government, the reports that come in, basically, everything he's done to just grab that info and get this data, have special servers just to collect the information. Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, when you see someone with so much money and so much power going after something that's basically being ignored by everyone else, it kind of really helps you think that there is something there that everyone else is ignoring. And then, of course, you have, Tom DeLonge putting his group together to the Stars Academy. And it's like, wait a minute. All these rich guys, they're all getting involved in this. There's got to be something there. Why is the general public just ignoring it?
I know. It drives me crazy, let me tell you. I mean, we got Senator Harry Reid now talking. There's Paul Hellyer, the Defense Minister of Canada.
Right.
There's a lot of people coming forth and saying, you guys, wake up. But it's funny, I work with a lot of people, and I've got a large family, and when this disclosure movement started picking up steam a little bit, I asked everyone, I'm like, oh, did you hear about, this disclosure stuff on TV, the Air Force? I'm like, no. And it was a big thing in the UFO community, but it barely made a ripple in terms of disclosure. And for me, I don't think the society is going to wake up until we're shown an alien body, period. A piece of metal is not going to do it. A film is not going to do it, unless maybe it's a landing with actual ETs coming out. But that's not going to do it. That's people be like, it's CGI. What do you think of that? Oh, isn't that cool? Blah, blah, blah. No, we need to see the craft. We need to see the bodies. And that's what I'm working for. And I don't think people are going to take this seriously until we do.
Yeah, and that's weird. You mentioned Harry Reid. Harry Reid, come on. Harry Reid and his political career. If someone saw him walking down the halls of Congress, they'd run shitless because Harry Reid's coming down. He's going to kick somebody's ass. But when he talks about UFOs and things like that, it seems like nobody's listening. He's no longer the E.F. Hutton of Congress. All of a sudden, it's like, he's going crazy. He's talking shit about UFOs. That's what I get. It's weird. Like UFO just cuts off all sensibilities, all being able to think about things, whether it be in the abstract or to be in the scientific terms. It just cuts all that off. Just shut up. Don't even talk about it. Forget about it. Oh, Harry Reid, he's a tough guy. Whatever. Leave him in Arizona. He'll die off like a prune later on.
It's purposeful. Our leaders know that this subject is, a hot potato.
Right.
And the military has a problem with it too. It's schizophrenic the way they deal with it. Here's a good example. This guy I interviewed, Ray Sachs, was an electrician's mate on the USS Clamagore, a submarine which carried nuclear missiles. This is back in 1971. That was confidential at the time. People didn't know. But he was there on the sub. They're heading up the coast one night at about 12 knots. This is off the East Coast. And this USO comes zooming up towards the submarine and starts pacing it just right off the edge there, 50 feet away or so, not far. And it was huge. It was bright. It was underwater. They didn't know what it was. The captain's, right up there on, they're on the surface now. The captain's on the deck, the second in command, Ray Sachs, the guy I interviewed, who was a lookout, and there was another guy. And one by one, all the major officers came out and looked at this thing, couldn't identify it. They asked the sonar room. The sonar got nothing on it. They didn't know what it was. Finally, this thing just zooms off, and the second in command turns to the commander and says, "How do you want me to record this in the log?" And the commander turns to him and says, "Officers who record this sort of thing in the log do not move up in rank." So it wasn't recorded. And this is how they're dealing with it. It's off paper. It's confidential. It's top secret. And they know it.
Exactly. And probably why the U.S. Navy came out with these new rules about, reporting UFOs, because, U.S. Navy airmen and women, even commercial pilots, always had their careers threatened when it came to UFOs. I mean, that falls directly in line with the whole situation. I personally think the U.S. Navy changed the rules just so that their man-made UFOs could be reported. That's just my idea.
Hey, I wouldn't doubt it. I'm sure that some of them are, ours for sure. But our military has totally bungled this because we have people on the front lines dealing with this. And this goes true for police officers as well, who can't report what they're seeing because they'll get fired or demoted or ridiculed.
Exactly.
And they're not informed. They're not told that this is a real phenomenon. They find out the hard way. and do sometimes report it upstairs, to the superiors, who will, generally speaking, not accept the report and ridicule them, not knowing that this is a real phenomena. Because there's sort of a middle level there that is not informed. The higher levels absolutely know this is real, and there are many cases where the Air Force is very interested in people's reports. But generally speaking, no, they'll just say, "Oh, you go ahead, call MUFON. We don't care."
MUFON. Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with him. So listen, here's the thing, Preston. How many hours would you estimate that you've put together in research and contacts and calling people and talking to people in researching all of your UFO books?
Oh, God, I have no idea, but it's a lot. I've been doing it for over 30 years, so, probably a year's worth, just solid at least, of actual field work. But yeah, this is a passion of mine. I think it's a very important subject. And I just can't believe it's being ignored. Like you said, it infuriates me. So I'm pretty gung-ho about it. I don't keep it secret. I'm very vocal at work. I don't preach about it, but man, oh man, this is going to be taught in schools. And I'm not giving up until I see that Roswell craft in a museum. I have the right. I want to see it. Show it to me. You guys don't have the right to keep it secret.
Preston, I think Deuce Bigelow, the Space Jiggler, already purchased that.
Yeah, well, I want to see it too. Damn it.
All right, so here's a question for you. Before we started the podcast, I said we need to talk about a current event situation. Now, the A-tip situation, great. I mean, that thing's never going to die. Everyone's always reporting it and putting it in their news articles in one way or another. But the big thing now is the whole Facebook raid on Area 51. What are your thoughts on that?
I love it. I think it's great. And I'm really interested to see how it all rolls out, because what we're seeing here is a much larger sort of belief base in this subject. More people believe our government is hiding information on this subject than actually believe in UFOs, which is really ironic.
Isn't that
funny? So yeah, we know our government is hiding stuff on this, and I think this is great. Let's apply the pressure. Let's let our leaders know it's time. Stop lying to us, because if our government does continue to lie, we lose faith in them. So it's to their benefit to, release the truth and be transparent. This is, a government of the people, for the people, by the people, which may sound idealistic, but it truly is. And we do have the right to know, and with enough pressure, definitely things will roll out, like this civil rights movement and, the Me Too movement and so on. And when an idea's time has come, nothing's going to stop it. And with all those people going up to Area 51, this is great. I don't think they're going to be able to get in. I've been there, not inside, obviously, but drove around it. It would take you all day to drive around. It's as big as a state. It's most of Nevada. Did you know that 86% of Nevada is owned by the federal government?
There you go. But I've seen the videos, and those camera dudes do not play when these people show up.
Yeah, who knows? Trump might send in troops and round these people up and put them in camps. I don't know. Something to consider. Kidding. But no, I mean, I think it's great. I'm really interested to see how big of an event this turns out to be. Maybe it's going to be a Woodstock type event, historic.
Yeah, and I think it is. I think it is if these people really are going to be committed to do it. So right now, I believe as of today, it's over 1 million people say they're going to attend, and well over 1 million say that they're interested in it. My biggest fear is that you'll have 10 people show up.
Well, it would be just as scary if 10 million people did too. Man, oh man.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of resources out there. To actually go out to Area 51, there's one gas station and you have to fill up. I remember I headed out there and I had 3/4 of a tank in an economy car. And I was pushing on empty by the time I hit that gas station. So, people better be careful. It's just flat desert for miles and miles and miles. But I do think it needs to be done. Our leaders do need to hear that this is a subject that most people do believe in and take seriously and want action on and want to be disclosed.
So now what's funny is that recently, and I don't know if you actually seen this, the Joe Rogan Experience had Bob Lazar on it.
I didn't see that episode. I know about Rogan and his show. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you check it out, you really should. I mean, even if you don't look at any other Joe Rogan episode, Bob Lazar's, for ufology folks, that's the one to see. And I can admit that prior to that, I really could care less about Bob Lazar. He actually, because I've seen the old videos, and I've seen, in a lot of ways, he wasn't impressive back in the day when he was reporting this to George Knapp, what his situation was in Area 51. However, when he was on Joe Rogan, he seemed really human. I could almost connect with him. But he actually put out a tweet saying, discouraging people to, to just not do this. Don't go to Area 51 because pretty much crap's probably not going to be there when you show up anyway. It probably moved a long time ago, and it's not even there. Do you? I personally think that Area 51, the way the government moves, I'm thinking there's a whole freaking city under that thing, and no one's ever going to get to those levels. I'm talking about maybe like 20, 30 levels down into the desert at this point. So do you think that this is really going to really amount to anything other than people saying, these are a bunch of potheads, a bunch of crackheads coming out trying to do things? It's a viral situation. No one really cares about this.
It is going to have an effect because it's kind of, if it actually a million people show up, for sure, it will be covered by the media. I don't think they'll get inside, and hopefully it doesn't result in violence. But if it does, boy, then we're really going to see fireworks.
Right.
I do think it's still active because if it wasn't, they would let people in. It's absolutely active. And like I said, they have so much of this stuff, they have no place to move it. I mean, there is so much of it that it's gotten to the point where it's, there is a cover-up, yeah, but shoot, I've talked to Navy guys, all kinds of pilots and officers who are revealing stuff to me. I'm like, gosh, are you sure it's okay that you tell me this? And they're like, well, yeah, they didn't make me sign anything, so... And what we're seeing, I think, is our government is not prosecuting these people because to do so would be to admit that it's true.
Right.
So we've got a lot of whistleblowers coming out now. I do think that events like this need to occur. I really hope that people do show up there. But yeah, I hope they bring their own water.
Yeah, definitely lots of water and lots of protection. Maybe a couple of bulletproof vests might work also.
Yeah, for sure. I've been there a few times. There's the Little Alien. There was a little conference that was held up there every now and then. It's a cool place. It's pretty interesting. And I've talked to people who've seen stuff up there for sure. Some really amazing stuff. There was a time where you could go out there regularly out to the mailboxes and see these craft going up and landing. Probably ours. Probably us flying the stuff there.
So, Preston, we're in the last, 12 minutes of the podcast. Now, your last book, The Healing Power of UFOs, again, fascinating book, 300 true accounts of people healed by extraterrestrials. But what do you have coming up for the folks to keep an eye out for that's in the works for you?
Always working on something. Right now, it's crazy. You probably heard of the Rua, Zimbabwe aerial school case where a UFO landed at an elementary school.
Yes.
It's a very famous case, 1994. It's one of about 4 or 5 well-known cases like that. And I've ran into my own case. I have a witness who saw a gray ET in front of Stagg Street Elementary School here in Van Nuys, California.
Amazing.
And I started getting other cases. And I'm like, gosh, there's that Zimbabwe case. And then I found out that there was these others. So I dug in, did some real research, and I've got about 100 cases now. And these are not normal, typical sightings. These objects are coming low over playgrounds, 100 feet, 200 feet. 30% of the cases involve landings or humanoids. So it's a big deal. It's all over the world, stretching back decades. I'm going crazy putting this research together. I'm just wrapping it up right now. I'm hoping to get this book out this year. in a few months, hopefully. But we'll see. It's amazing.
So it seems like these guys are no longer just staying in the dark. They're just like, whatever. I mean, school kids, you really can't say that they were impacted by E.T., especially not now, right? E.T., the extraterrestrial movie by Spielberg. So it seems like they just want to be known.
Yeah, it's very interesting because kids are, in some ways not great witnesses. They're very imaginative. They have invisible playmates and so have a kind of a blurred sense of reality and fantasy. But on the other hand, like you said, their minds are unsullied. They have no preconceptions, or they don't discriminate. They just kind of report what they see. And it's pretty easy to tell when they're lying. And when you've got a whole group of them, mind you, most of these cases involve 20, 30, 40 children, 50, 100, 200, up to 400 in some cases. So there's a lot of witnesses, and usually teachers there are seeing this stuff too. So you can't just say, it's just kids. But yeah, I think they make great witnesses. And, the fact that these ETs are here's a very interesting fact. Half of these cases involve elementary schools age, the youngest age of children. So they're clearly interested in influencing children from a very young age.
Amazing. I wonder what Dr. Hynek would say in reading your book regarding all these experiences, because apparently these were not things that he was researching back during Project Blue Book.
No, Project Blue Book was a whitewash. It was a way for the Air Force to handle this influx of reports. The very best ones never got to Blue Book. They went to the Air Technical Intelligence Command, ones that affected, quote, national security. So they didn't get a lot of them. And the whole abduction phenomena was very difficult to be accepted. And for that matter, crash retrievals. We had reports coming in early on, and even UFO researchers pretty much ignored them or debunked them. And humanoid reports were, pretty slow in being accepted as well. And he was right on the front lines. He was really one of the first scientists to take this subject seriously. Him, James McDonald, there's really no one else. Jacques Vallée was an early scientist who looked into this, but most of the people who were looking into it who were scientists were very secretive about it. J. Allen Hynek was on the front lines, and he sort of broke it open. I don't think he got a real chance to look into the abduction phenomenon the way he would have liked. I would have guessed that he would have written another book about abductions if he had the chance, but just never got around to it.
Well, I've got to ask you, this is we're talking about Dr. Hynek before we let you go, but what do you think about the new series on the History Channel? I'm disappointed. I turned it off the first episode, and I'm like, oh, fine, I'll turn it. I mean, I understand you have to have dramatic license, but they kind of overdid that, and I thought it would have been a much better series if they really just followed it and tried to make these episodes a true reflection of what really happened. I do appreciate that they used real events in terms of, like real sightings, and those were portrayed in a very interesting way. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely things to enjoy about it, but it ended up being misleading. And like the movie Fire in the Sky, which was a great movie, except for the onboard segment, which was totally Hollywood. It wasn't at all what happened. And I can't tell you how many people came up to me after that movie and were like, oh my God, is that what happens? Did they drill in your eyeballs and that plastic thing and then blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, no, and no. None of that was actually even close to real. So, yeah, I'm disappointed on how Hollywood portrays this subject. And I still think we're waiting for the really ultimate, E.T. movie. E.T. the Extraterrestrial wasn't it. Communion was a great movie, but failed to get, a wide audience, or at least as wide as I would have liked. And Bud Hopkins did a TV miniseries. That was the best one so far. Intruders, I think it was the best. But there's, Dark Skies. There's been a bunch of shows on this. The X-Files was good, but that became very formulaic. I had to stop watching that because they were always walking around with flashlights at night in every episode. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I laugh because I've been telling people that for a while now, especially like other shows will reach out to me and say, hey, let's get a show together and talk about this Project Blue Book. After the second or third episode, it's like, no, it's like any other, miniseries. They're just taking a poetic license and they're just going. I mean, I'm ready to see dinosaurs. Apparently Heinrich saw dinosaurs too. I don't know. I couldn't do it. I was ready for, the Project Blue Book Jurassic Park version. I couldn't do it. But I agree with you fully. It was not a good one for me. Entertainment value, yeah, it was entertaining, but it didn't portray ufology in a good light. It just didn't.
No, it didn't. It did sort of portray J. Allen Hynek and his frustration with the military, but he wasn't, it was absolutely inaccurate. Really a shame.
Mm-hmm. So, Preston, you have been an amazing guest, and I've seen that your books are going to be a wealth of information for folks because of all the research you put over the years. But I'm going to give you the last word before we sign out. Any last words that you want to leave people an impression about ufology, about your work, and what it all means?
Hey, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and thanks for having me on the show. It's been awesome. It's a subject I take very seriously. If you don't believe in UFOs, I challenge you to ask your loved ones, your family, your friends, your coworkers, the people around you, ask them if they've had an unexplained experience. Leave it wide open. And I think you'll be shocked to hear people telling you all kinds of stuff that has happened to them. I think this is a very widespread phenomena. I don't think UFOs are going away. What's happening now is unprecedented in human history in terms of, this modern age of UFOs beginning in 1947. And these waves of sightings and abductions, we have nothing like that in human history recorded that we know of. So this is a big event. Something very important and profound is happening to us. There's a large number of ETs out there, 3 or 4 or 5 main types, but there's a multitude. And I expect that we'll be having open official contact at some point, probably right after there's a major disclosure type event. But I think they'll probably go hand in hand, and it's an exciting time to live for sure. Yeah.
Preston, thank you very much for joining UFO Buster Radio and myself, Manny Moonraker, today on his podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know more about Preston and his work, we do have 2 links in the description. One is the link to his Weebly site where you can kind of have a preview of his books and things like that. But more importantly, if you want to get your hands and put your eyeballs onto his research and all the folks that he's talked to about this phenomena, the Amazon link to his books is in the description. Give it a look-see. Go ahead and check it out. Listen, anything from USOs to healings from aliens. If you live in Colorado, you want to look at that book. If you live in Arizona, check it out. There are tons of books in there that you guys are going to be interested in. And let me tell you, this is, again, Preston is fresh off of winning the Writers and Illustrators of the Future contest, and it will be published. L. Ron Hubbard Presents Writers of the Future, Volume 35. He is part of that. There's a reason why he won that particular event. So you guys want to take some time to look at his work. And Preston, is there anywhere that they can reach you if they have questions about your volume of work?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just go to my website, you can contact me through my website. I've got my email there. And also through Facebook, of course. Always happy to hear from people, whether they've got a question or a comment or a story they want to share. So, yeah, that'd be great.
Ladies and gentlemen, Preston Dennett. Again, check the links in the description. Thank you, Preston, for joining. And this is it, folks. We'll check you out tomorrow for more UFO news. This is UFO Buster Radio, and ciao.